Welcome back to another edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines as we continue our Florida State spring football preview. We are now going to move on to the running backs. We did the quarterbacks yesterday. We're going to try to make our opinions on this a little bit more efficient and quicker than we did on our 30-minute quarterback podcast, but quarterbacks are where it's at. And listen, Florida State's going to have a new look to its running back room. Gone is Trey Benson, who will be running 4.38 in the NFL next year. He had a great combine in Indy this week. Rodney Hill, interesting story there. We all like Rodney. Thought he might be a player at FSU. He transfers to FAMU, then Miami, then back to FAMU. Fascinating story. I can't wait to find out the backstory there. Then C.J. Campbell, also, who C.J. was kind of a fan favorite and had a lot of respect from his teammates and fans alike, and he has transferred to FAU, which means Florida State will return Lawrence Toafili, guys. It's hard to believe he is a redshirt senior. I remember when he was a true freshman. I think he played in Miami as a true freshman. Isn't that Mike's first year? When Mike missed it, I remember Lawrence. I think that's kind of when he had his first couple of big plays. Then you got Alabama transfer Roydell Williams, who's a senior. You got redshirt senior Keziah Holmes, who played some last year for Florida State. Then you've got redshirt freshman Sam Singleton, who we saw a little bit in some mop-up time. I think a guy we all going to want to see. I don't know how much we're going to talk about him today, but true freshman Kam Davis, by all accounts, has looked very solid in off-season conditioning, and obviously we know he is a physical freak for an 18-year-old. You just don't see kids that fully developed. But we'll talk a little bit about that. Then you got Indiana transfer Jalen Lucas, who is a kick returner / running back. So a little bit of a new look to the running back room. Guys, just your overall thoughts on the additions of Roydell Williams and Kam Davis and Jalen Lucas. And we'll get Micaiah Danzy in the fall. But just let's talk about let's compare how they replaced Trey and Rodney with two new guys, Roydell Williams and Jalen Lucas.
Like Roydell Williams a lot from some of the highlights we saw at Alabama, had some really some good yards after contact on some punishing runs. Obviously played Georgia, had some success in that SEC championship game. Roydell kind of looks like, I know Mike Norvell doesn't have a number one / workhorse back, but when you're looking at finding 2 or 3 backs, he's definitely going to be toward the top. And I think he will complement a Lawrence Toafili, who I still think is a better receiver than running back, but that's for another discussion. I think you've got some complementary skill sets there. You've got some position versatility when you bring in a Jalen Lucas, a guy who can really catch passes out of the backfield. Yes, he can run it. He's tiny. I mean, man, he might be listed at 5'9". I don't think he is 5'9", but what he can do, with just how elusive he is as a returner. But if you can get him the ball in the open field, thinking about screens and little dump offs into the flat, there's a lot to like about what a Jalen Lucas can bring to this offense too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny that he's Ja'Kai Douglas's brother, because I think body type wise he looks like Ja'Kai, and I think skill set wise he can do a lot of the same things that Ja'Kai has done really well at Florida State. I think Mike will be able to move him all over the place. And obviously, we're not talking about it today, but I think he is a major asset as a kick returner as well. Had I think three kickoff return touchdowns in 2 years at Indiana. I think Roydell's got. I mean, I remember he got asked about kind of Trey Benson and during his first interview at FSU and was like, wow, I don't know Trey, but I watched his film and was very impressed last year. I think he's going to have some, you talked about how punishing a runner, the yards after contact. I think he will have Trey's ability to really improve as games go on and break those runs later in games, just as defenses get a little more battered and worn down. I think I'm excited to see this spring what he looks like. I think he's very complimentary, like Trey was, to Lawrence Toafili, who does so many things well. You said, I think we're going to talk about Kam a lot, because I think Kam Davis is going to have an instant role. I think, he watching him last summer at the Seminole Showcase in Doak Campbell Stadium, how big he is. He is built like a brick wall. I think he is a worthy successor maybe to Trey's brick nickname or something in that vein for sure. But I wasn't sure how well he'd move at his size. And then I saw him, I was like, oh, wow. He is incredibly fast for how muscular and built he is. So he might be the freshman I'm most excited to see. He's definitely on the short list of the freshmen I'm most excited to see this spring, and I do think he could be in that rotation right away in some facet as a freshman.
Yeah, I agree. You kind of take it, and I'm probably the wrong term to use. You kind of take him for granted because he's been committed so long. We've heard about it for so long, but this will be our first real opportunity to see him. I want to call him Little Herschel until he threatens to beat me up because he's from Georgia and he's built similar. He's smaller than not as tall as Herschel, but when you see his chest and his thighs, he's got that type of muscular build and again, a guy that can come in and make an impact as a freshman, as we've seen a couple of running backs do last year in college football. Texas had the kid out of Orlando that played, but so you can get a guy that's as physically developed as he is for an 18-year-old, and with, as you said, his speed, his agility, his strength. I think we're probably all as excited to see him as we are anybody else, and I can't wait to see him, and I can't wait to see him in pads. We've seen what he looks like in shorts. We know what he can do. We know what he can do. I think just like anybody else. As a true freshman, is how quickly does he develop to the speed of the game, the physicality of college football. I think we all would agree that we expect him to make that adjustment fairly well, and I think he's got the expectation, the mindset to do that. But I think we're all looking forward to seeing him. And Bob, I'm going to go back to your other point, how they use Toafili and Roydell Williams. You mentioned that you thought he was a better receiver. Well, there's some evidence of that. Lawrence Toafili is the leading returning pass catcher on Florida State's roster coming back. He's 21 catches, lead the team in returners. So he is and Morlock leads in yards. We'll talk about tight ends in a couple of days, but Morlock leads in yards. Lawrence is the most dependable, based on stats, receiver that Florida State has its back on its roster. So, if to your point, let's talk a little bit about this. Let's project a little bit. We've liked Keziah Holmes. We've seen some flashes of him. I thought he might play a little bit more than he did this past season. But we liked him when we saw him last spring, and then obviously in the fall he showed some in practice, showed some things. Let's assume that he continues to take the next step in his development. Roydell asserts himself as the guy because he's a little bit more of a physical type runner than Lawrence, even though Lawrence is obviously not afraid to stick it up there in between the tackles. But if you get some production, or you feel good about Williams, Holmes, and possibly Kam Davis, and you got Jalen Lucas in there, do you think there's a possibility that Lawrence could end up playing more in the slot than he does at running back?
It's tough. I mean, just because I feel kind of like what Florida State has at slot. Like, I think they have plenty of options there when you look at, Ja'Kai, Jalen Lucas might play there some, Destin Hill, I think when healthy, we saw some promising signs as a freshman. So I think he'll line up there some, but I still think his main usage will be out of the backfield. I think, whether he's the starter or not doesn't really matter because he'll play a bunch, whether him or Roydell is kind of the true starter. And there'll probably be games they start with two running backs in the backfield. And I imagine Lawrence will be one of them. So he'll play there some, but I can't see it happening full time just because I kind of like what they have there.
Well, I think Bob's going to come up with a T-shirt to try to get it. And by the way, you mentioned in our earlier podcast on quarterbacks, buy stock in Brock. You need to go ahead and trademark that and put it on the Osceola website as a T-shirt to sell. And then we can sign an NLI deal with Brock, and he can get some of the proceeds. We get some of the proceeds. But so, Bob, you think he's a great receiver? What would you do with Lawrence if those three guys assert themselves? Coming into spring, going out of spring. If Roydell Williams is the best true running back, and Keziah and Kam show their ability to be backups. And Mike has always done it. You go back to his Memphis days with Antonio Gibson, and I can't remember the other kid's name with the Cowboys now, but he's always been able to manage multiple great players at one position. And obviously Kurt's alluded to that's how he thinks Mike will do it this year. But would you like to see Lawrence at receiver more, Bob?
I think Curt kind of teased to something that I've been kicking around is do you use a lot of two running back sets just because it gives you that position flexibility where you can use LT and the defense doesn't really know, is he going to be a runner? Is he going to be a blocker? could he go out and catch passes? Because, yes, LT's not a great runner between the tackles, but there's a lot that he can do. He's got 2,000 offensive yards to his resume, and I think that brings some things to the table. Like last year, I wanted to see 2 tight ends on the field a lot. This year, I kind of want to see 2 running backs on the field enough just to see how it plays out. Are you able to move the sticks sufficiently with that kind of personnel? So if it is about having your best 11 out there to some extent, I kind of want to see some 2 running backs out there. I don't want to take Keziah Holmes for granted. Like last year, going into last year, I really kind of put him on the back burner, said, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to get out of Keziah, what we're going to see from him. And then he was like one of the best August guys out there last year, right? Yep. So we should not take him for granted, even though we're really intrigued by the new toys, the Roydell, the Kam, Jalen Lucas. I think we felt great about this running back room last year. Kind of feel like even though you're moving on from Trey Benson, feel really good about this room yet again going into spring at the least.
Yeah. All right. And before we move forward, we do want to thank our sponsor for today's podcast, Aer Lingus at Anthony Travel. If you're looking to go to the Dublin game, our Georgia Tech game in Dublin, Ireland, please go to Seminoles2Ireland.com and join your fellow Florida State fans on a trip you won't soon forget. Game tickets for Florida State and Georgia Tech's August 24th game are available for Florida State athletics. Go to Seminoles2Ireland.com. Seminoles, the number 2, Ireland.com. It's scrolling at the bottom of the screen if you're watching, but certainly get your tickets. I know they're going to go fast. It's a much anticipated trip, and if you're lucky enough, if you're in the right pub, Curt's going to hang out with you and give you updated practice reports and some inside scoop as he'll be representing Osceola in Ireland with Jerry Cutts. But anything else on the running backs? I mean, obviously, we've heard David Johnson say that he thinks Toafili is a pro-type back, that he can play pro football. So, and then obviously Roydell Williams has been successful at Alabama. What do you want to see out of Lawrence this spring? I mean, what is the next step in his development, as he will have a more prominent role, more than likely, than he did this past season?
I don't know if LT can improve on his biggest weakness, which still is running between the tackles. I think he's going to have those running opportunities, but with the personnel that you've got on this roster, like that's a better fit for Roydell. It's a better fit for probably a Kam Davis. You've got DJU as a running back who's either under center or in the shotgun or pistol, however you're used. I do see LT as an NFL guy down the road. I think he's got that versatility where he can be a third down type of back who's very valuable for an NFL team. But I'm not sure how much they're going to try to specifically showcase maybe him as much as just using everything that he brings to the table.
All right, so there's one guy he was kind of a Swiss Army knife in the Orange Bowl. Ja'Kai Douglas played a little bit of quarterback, a little bit of running back, a little bit of receiver. With what Florida State has right now in the running back room, and Florida State lists Ja'Kai as a receiver, and that's why we don't have him on our depth chart, although we know he can play running back. Would you guys think Ja'Kai could become a factor at running back, given what they have at receiver? Now, a lot of unproven guys at receiver, a lot of guys that are still in their development, but a receiver group that's got some potential. Do you think Ja'Kai could turn into a swing guy if they feel really good about the depth and some of the young guys at receiver? Could Ja'Kai become a factor at running back?
I mean, maybe I would have said maybe at the start of the offseason, but I kind of feel like with the transfer additions now, that room's deep enough where they don't really need Ja'Kai. I think if they want Ja'Kai there, you can put Jalen Lucas there because they're kind of the same player. And Jalen's listed at running back and Ja'Kai's at receiver. I mean, I think I do start to not question the slot depth, but if you take away Ja'Kai there, don't play him there primarily, there are more questions about it. So I think he'll play primarily there, but I mean, I wouldn't be stunned to see him there from time to time, or them motion him there, or them motion him from there to the slot. I mean, Mike loves to do all kinds of crazy things with his backs, and I think Ja'Kai is the ultimate example of that.
Yeah, the one thing we should just add on Jalen is he's a multi-year transfer. So there's reason to get him out there now, and he may not get a ton of carries or catches. He might be, I won't say exclusively a returner, predominantly a returner. Yeah. But the great thing is you get him back for 2025. So you kind of want Jalen to get what opportunities he can at running back, whereas you really need Ja'Kai more at receiver. That's just my read on it going in.
I don't know. Are Toafili, Roydell, and Keziah, are they all like out of eligibility after 2024? Do any of them have a COVID year they could tap into or a medical redshirt? Because like if Florida State is losing all three of them, then yeah, I think Bob's dead on. Where it's Kam Davis and question mark entering 2025. So I think getting Jalen that experience, or a Sam Singleton, we haven't talked about him, that experience could be valuable.
Yeah, listen, Sam's a guy that can. He can burn it up. You go back and watch his high school highlights, and we saw him with a long run this past season. I mean, he's a guy that's got. He kind of reminds me. He kind of runs like Eric Dickerson. He kind of runs straight up, but he flies. So let's talk about Sam. But we almost forget about him because everybody's excited about Roydell and Kam, and you got Lawrence coming back. But what do you guys expect from Sam in the spring? What would you like to see from Sam in the spring?
I mean, I want to see him competing to be in the rotation, or I think there's a world he's not here in 2025, if I'm being honest. I think he is a candidate in that camp. But I think, like you said, he has that speed. We've seen it. He's another guy who missed some time, I think, with an injury and didn't get into a game until, late last season. But you did see it in flashes. We saw it some on the practice field. I'm curious. I mean, especially we haven't talked about another running back coming in over the summer. Where does Sam fit in the pecking order this spring, and how much can he show?
Yeah. Listen, I think that I think the other running back you're referencing is Micaiah, right?
Yes.
Micaiah, yeah. And listen, I think he's going to be a guy that Micaiah, because he's coming in late, will be a redshirt guy. I don't think.
I agree, but I'm talking looking ahead to 2025. Do we see enough in practice, even while Micaiah's probably redshirting, where it's like, I think Micaiah's ahead of Sam? That becomes the question. And
to answer your question on Roydell, this would be his 5th year. So yeah, he played 2020, which was a free year, but he also played in 2021, 2022, 2020. So he's got 4 years to play 5. So this would be his last year. So you would have Lawrence, Roydell, and Keziah all gone next year.
Well, it's a lot of turnover. I mean, you are mapping out the future in a lot of regards.
Yeah. So
mapping out the future's changed a bit with the portal, and that works both ways. But it's interesting to see what you get from those other 3 guys who you expect to be back.
Yeah, well, listen, I think it's going to be a fascinating spring. I think it is. Listen, I think what we've seen in the past is there's going to be at least 3 running backs playing on a regular basis. That's what we've seen from Mike. There's usually a 3-man rotation, and then he'll, like you said, he'll do some odd stuff. Like we've seen CJ Campbell come in the first quarter and get 2 carries, and then he disappears for the rest of the game. So the substitution pattern at running back can be a little bit interesting at times. But listen, I can't wait to see Roydell and Kam. It's always the new guys that you're most looking forward to see. As you guys have both alluded to, we kind of know what Lawrence is, right? He's kind of that Swiss Army knife that Mike can use at either slot. He can even line him up at outside receiver, depending on the formation. But I think it's going to be interesting to see Roydell, Kam, and even Jalen to a lesser extent. I just think that obviously Roydell and Kam will be those would be your workhorses, where Jalen, I think, would be more of a situational type guy based on what we've seen from him at Indiana. So I think it's going to be a fascinating spring at running back. I think it's going to be a fascinating spring overall. I can't wait till we talk about wide receivers and tight ends, because there's so much to listen. When we start talking about how much production left at wide receiver and the potential and the unknowns there, I think it's going to be fascinating. I can't wait to ask you guys who you think the top 6 receivers are going to be. But let's just talk about it. Who do you project as the top 2 running backs coming out of spring practice? And we have not seen, 2 of these guys in person. But if you had to say the top 2 running backs based on what you know about them, have heard about them, who do you think, if you had to guess, would be the top 2 running backs coming out of spring ball?
I would go Roydell and LT. I'm very curious about Kam and where he might fit as he gets more time at running back. Again, remember, he was a high school quarterback out of necessity. There could be some fun wrinkles that Norvell and the staff can put out there with Kam, because he can throw the ball, right? I mean, that could be fun.
Yep.
But I lean toward Roydell and LT.
Yeah, I think
agreed.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're all fascinated by Kam because we've heard about him for 2 years.
And you can't forget Keziah.
Yeah, you can't forget Keziah. Yeah. And really,
we always seem to. It's hard. I mean,
you can't forget. I mean, we almost skipped over Sam just because of the new guys. But Sam had carried the ball 8 times last year, but 56 yards, average 7 yards per carry. Small sample size, but certainly showed you some flashes there that he could be the guy. Listen, Keziah averaged 6.4 yards per carry. Not last year, 29 carries for 185 yards. Obviously, a guy that can flip the field, had a long run of 40. So you're right. He's a guy that we all thought, well, he kind of surprised us, right? Last spring and last fall. We're like, well, this guy could find himself playing a lot of football. And we were kind of surprised that he did not play more, that he did only got 29. Like, I think we all thought that he might get Rodney Hill's carries. Rodney got 50 last year. I think we all thought going into the season that maybe Keziah had passed Rodney Hill by just because of experience. But so it's going to be fascinating. I can't listen. This is a much different looking football team than the one we got to follow last year. They've lost so much talent on offense. It's going to be fascinating to see how they replace it. You're talking about potentially Verse, Fisk, Coleman, possibly 3 first-round draft picks. I saw that you had some people talking about Fisk being in. Now, Coleman might have hurt himself with the 40, but Benson certainly did not. But you're talking about up to maybe 7 or 8 of the 12 guys that went to the combine. You have 7 or 8 that are legitimately going to be taken in the first 4 rounds. We're looking at a much different football team. So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch what happens at every position group. But I think obviously you've got some proven talent in the running back room, and you got some potential talent in the running back room. So I think it's going to be just like every other position group at Florida State in the spring. It's going to be fun to watch, see how this competition plays out in the spring. Now, if you're listening to us, please subscribe to the Osceola. Go to floridastate.rivals.com. Check us out. We've got a ton of content right now on our site. We've got the spring football previews. We've got baseball coverage, basketball coverage, softball coverage. There's almost recruiting, which is now opened up. The dead period is over. The recruits will be back on campus. So there's a ton of stuff at floridastate.rivals.com or theosceola.com. And then obviously, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll get notifications. And obviously, you can follow us on Twitter or X, whatever they're calling it, at Osceola_rivals.com. But we appreciate you joining us for our running back preview. We will be back later in the week to preview the wide receivers, then the tight ends, and then my favorite group, the offensive linemen. We'll finish up later in the week with that. But appreciate you joining us. Appreciate Curt and Bob's time. And we look forward to providing you with the best spring practice coverage for Florida State in town. So check us out. Go to the Osceola and look at some of our free content. Then go ahead and hit that subscribe button and stay with us for a while.
Thanks for watching. For more Florida State recruiting interviews, post-game press conferences, and insider podcasts, make sure you are subscribed to the Osceola YouTube channel and turn on post notifications so you don't miss any uploads. For daily Florida State content and news, make sure you go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com.